The year was 1963, and something impossible was about to happen, 500 miles off the coast of Boston. Lieutenant James Flatley III stared at the USS Forrestal's flight deck through his cockpit window, knowing that what he was attempting had never been done before and would likely never be attempted again. Behind him, a massive four-engined Lockheed 130F Hercules groaned under its own weight, its 132-foot wingspan clearing the carrier's island superstructure by just 15 feet. But this wasn't just any cargo plane. This flying behemoth had been secretly converted into something the military desperately needed, a flying hospital capable of reaching wounded soldiers anywhere in the world and landing on the shortest, most dangerous runways imaginable. What happened over the next few hours would set records that still stand today and change military medical evacuation forever. The story begins not with Lieutenant Flatley, but with a heated argument in a California office 12 years earlier. April 10, 1951, Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, Burbank. Willis Hawkins, the 37-year-old head of advanced design, stood nervously in Hall Hibbard's office holding a 15-inch model airplane and a 130-page proposal. The tension was thick as Hibbard called in Kelly Johnson, the legendary designer behind some of America's most advanced aircraft. Johnson took one look at Hawkins' design and delivered his verdict. "Hibbard, if you sign that letter, you will destroy the Lockheed Company." The aircraft in question looked nothing like the sleek fighters and spy planes Johnson was famous for. It was essentially a flying boxcar, utilitarian and ungainly, designed to carry cargo rather than break speed records. But Hawkins knew something Johnson didn't. The Korean War had just broken out, and a forgotten Air Force colonel had identified a critical gap in military capability. American forces needed an aircraft that could land on unprepared airstrips, carry massive loads, and operate in conditions that would ground conventional aircraft. The military needed a truck with wings, not a sports car. The Air Force's requirements seemed almost impossible to meet. They wanted an aircraft capable of carrying 92 infantrymen or 64 paratroopers on missions with a combat radius of 1,100 nautical miles. Alternatively, it needed to transport a 30,000-pound cargo load more than 960 miles. It had to operate from short, unprepared airstrips made of clay, sand, or dirt. It needed to slow down to 125 knots for paradrops and even slower for assault landings. Most challenging of all, it required both a rear ramp operable in flight for heavy equipment drops and side doors for paratroop drops. Hawkins' design team faced this challenge with characteristic American pragmatism. As Hawkins later recalled, "We basically took the dimensions of the biggest piece of equipment the Air Force had specified, drew a circle around its cross-section, and turned the circle into a tube about the length of a railroad boxcar. We put wings, a nose, and a tail on it, and we had the design." Despite Johnson's pessimism, Hibbard signed the proposal. On July 2, 1951, Lockheed won the contract for two prototypes designated YC-130. The first flight came on August 23, 1954, with test pilots Stan Belts and Roy Wimmer at the controls. Even Johnson, flying chase in a P-2V Neptune, had to admit the ugly duckling flew better than anyone expected.
The C-130 Hercules entered service in 1956. But its potential as a medical platform wasn't immediately recognized. The aircraft's cavernous cargo hold, measuring 40 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 9 feet high, could accommodate far more than just supplies and equipment. Military medical planners began to see possibilities that would revolutionize battlefield medicine. The transformation began during the Vietnam War in the early 1960s. American forces were scattered across remote bases throughout Southeast Asia, often in locations accessible only by air. Traditional medical evacuation aircraft, like the twin-engine C-1 Trader, had limited range and payload capacity. If a carrier was operating in the middle of the Pacific, wounded personnel might wait days for evacuation to proper medical facilities. The answer came from an unexpected source: the KC-130F. A refueling variant of the Hercules operated by the U.S. Marines. Engineers realized that with modifications, the aircraft's spacious interior could be converted into a flying intensive care unit, equipped with everything from basic first aid supplies to complete surgical suites. The medical conversion process was remarkable in its scope and ingenuity. The cargo hold could accommodate up to 74 litter patients or 97 ambulatory patients, more than any other aircraft in the American inventory. Medical technicians would install specialized racks for litter patients, ensuring they could be properly secured during flight and accessed by medical personnel throughout the evacuation. The aircraft's electrical and oxygen systems were enhanced to support advanced life support equipment. Suction devices, defibrillators, mechanical ventilators, and even portable X-ray machines could be installed as needed. The pressurized cabin meant patients could be transported at altitudes that would be impossible in unpressurized aircraft, reducing flight time and improving survival rates. But the most revolutionary aspect wasn't the medical equipment itself, but where the flying hospital could operate. Unlike traditional fixed-wing ambulances that required long, prepared runways, the C-130's unique design allowed it to land on dirt strips, aircraft carriers, and even frozen lakes. The aircraft's 4 Allison T-56 turboprop engines provided the power needed for short takeoffs and landings, while its robust landing gear could handle rough surfaces that would destroy conventional aircraft. This capability would be put to the ultimate test in October 1963, when the Navy decided to attempt something that aviation experts considered impossible: landing a fully loaded C-130 on an aircraft carrier deck. The mission originated from a practical military need. The Navy's carrier onboard delivery system relied on the Grumman C-1 trader, but this aircraft had severe limitations. With only a 300-mile range and limited payload capacity, the trader couldn't support carriers operating in the vast expanses of the Pacific Ocean. If a carrier was stationed more than 300 miles from land, it essentially had no resupply capability for urgent cargo or medical evacuations. The answer came from the Hercules. With its 2,500-mile range and 25,000-pound payload capacity, a C-130 could reach carriers anywhere in the world's oceans. But could something that massive actually land on a carrier deck? The aircraft selected for the test was KC-130F, burrow number 149798, on loan from the U.S. Marines. Lockheed engineers made minimal modifications to the standard aircraft. They installed a smaller nose landing gear orifice, improved the anti-skid braking system, and removed the underwing refueling pods. The aircraft remained its full medical evacuation capability, including litter racks and life support systems.
Lieutenant James Flatley III was chosen to pilot the historic mission. An experienced test pilot with extensive carrier experience, Flatley initially thought someone was playing a practical joke when he received the assignment. Operate a C-130 off an aircraft carrier? Somebody's got to be kidding, he reportedly said. But the Chief of Naval Operations himself had ordered the feasibility study, and Flatley was the man chosen to make aviation history. The crew consisted of LT Commander W.W. Stovall as co-pilot, ADR-1 E.F. Brennan as flight engineer, and Lockheed test pilot Ted H. Limmer, Jr. The USS Forrestal, a 1,067-foot supercarrier, would serve as their runway. But even this massive ship provided less than half the length of a typical airport runway. October 30th, 1963 dawned with rough seas and 40-knot winds. The Forrestal was positioned 500 miles off the coast of Boston, far from any emergency landing sites. Weather conditions were marginal at best, with the carrier's deck rising and falling 30 feet with each wave. The ship's speed was increased by 10 knots to reduce yaw motion and provide additional headwind for the landing. Lockheed's chief engineer, Art E. Flock, was aboard the carrier to observe the testing. The sea was pretty big that day, he later recalled. I was up on the captain's bridge. I watched a man on the ship's bow as that bow must have gone up and down 30 feet. As Flatley lined up for his first approach, the impossibility of the task became clear. The KC-130F weighed 121,000 pounds fully loaded, making it by far the largest and heaviest aircraft ever to attempt a carrier landing.
Its wingspan of 132 feet meant the wingtips would clear the carrier's island superstructure by less than 15 feet. There were no arresting cables strong enough to stop such a massive aircraft, so Flatley would have to execute an unarrested landing using only the aircraft's brakes and the headwind. The first touchdown was perfect. Despite predictions that the aircraft would never be able to stop, the KC-130F came to a complete halt within 267 feet, about twice the aircraft's wingspan. The crew and spectators were amazed. At lighter weights, the aircraft could stop in even shorter distances. Over the next several days, Flatley and his crew completed 29 touch-and-go landings, 21 full-stop landings, and 21 unassisted takeoffs. The tests demonstrated that even with maximum payload, the Hercules used only 745 feet for takeoff and 460 feet for landing roll. These distances were well within the capabilities of the Forrestal's 1,067-foot flight deck. The short landing roll resulted from close coordination between Flatley and Jerry Doherty, the carrier's landing signal officer. Doherty would give Flatley an engine chop while still 3 or 4 feet off the deck, allowing the aircraft to settle quickly onto the deck and begin braking immediately.
Test pilot Ted Limmer participated in some of the initial landings and was astonished by the results. The last landing I participated in, we touched down about 150 feet from the end, stopped in 270 feet more, and launched from that position, using what was left of the deck. We still had a couple hundred feet left when we lifted off. Admiral Brown was flabbergasted. The success of the carrier trials proved that the C-130 could operate from the most restricted environments imaginable. But more importantly, it demonstrated that a fully equipped flying hospital could reach wounded personnel anywhere in the world, including ships at sea. The implications for military medicine were profound. The aircraft's medical capabilities were further enhanced throughout the 1960s and 1970s. The standard aeromedical evacuation configuration included a crew of 5 medical personnel, 2 flight nurses, and 3 medical technicians. This crew could provide continuous care during flights lasting up to 15 hours, the maximum endurance of the C-130 with extended-range fuel tanks. The medical equipment available was revolutionary for its time. Portable ventilators could keep critically wounded patients breathing during long flights. Defibrillators could restart stopped hearts at 30,000 feet. IV pumps ensured critically injured patients received proper medication and fluid replacement. Heart monitors tracked vital signs throughout the flight, allowing medical crews to detect problems before they became critical. Perhaps most importantly, the aircraft could carry a complete surgical suite when necessary. Portable operating tables, surgical instruments, anesthesia machines, and even X-ray equipment could transform the cargo hold into a flying emergency room. Surgeons could perform life-saving operations while the aircraft flew to advanced medical facilities, dramatically improving survival rates for the most critically injured. The psychological impact of the flying hospital was as important as its medical capabilities. Wounded soldiers knew that no matter how remote their location, no matter how dangerous the landing strip, the C-130 could reach them. This knowledge provided immeasurable comfort to troops serving in isolated locations around the world. The aircraft's versatility became legendary during the Vietnam War. C-130s regularly landed on dirt strips under enemy fire to evacuate wounded soldiers. The aircraft's ability to operate from short, unprepared runways meant that medical evacuation was possible from locations that no other aircraft could reach. One remarkable mission during the Vietnam War demonstrated the aircraft's capabilities under extreme conditions. A special forces based in the Central Highlands came under heavy attack, with multiple wounded personnel requiring immediate evacuation. The landing strip was only 1,200 feet long, made of pierced steel planking and under intermittent mortar fire. A medical evacuation C-130 crew volunteered for the mission despite the dangers. Flying at treetop level to avoid enemy radar, it approached the base just as the sun was setting. Enemy tracers lit up the sky around the aircraft as it descended toward the short runway. The pilot executed a combat landing, touching down as slowly as possible and using maximum braking to stop before running out of runway. Medical personnel quickly loaded 12 critically wounded soldiers onto litter racks in the cargo hold. The aircraft's medical crew began treatment immediately, starting IVs, administering pain medication, and monitoring vital signs. Despite enemy mortar rounds exploding nearby, the takeoff was successful and all patients were delivered to a field hospital within 2 hours of the original call for evacuation. Stories like this became commonplace as the C-130's medical evacuation capabilities became widely known. The aircraft participated in countless humanitarian missions, disaster relief operations, and combat evacuations around the world. Its unique combination of range, payload, and rough field capability made it the platform of choice for the most challenging medical evacuation missions.
The success of the carrier landing trials also opened new possibilities for naval operations. While the Navy ultimately decided the risks were too great for routine operations, the knowledge that a C-130 could reach a carrier in emergency situations provided new flexibility for fleet operations. Critically wounded personnel could be evacuated from carriers operating in remote areas, and urgent medical supplies could be delivered anywhere in the world's oceans. The engineering challenges overcome during the carrier trials led to improvements in the aircraft's design that benefited all C-130 operations. The enhanced braking system developed for carrier operations improved the aircraft's performance on short runways worldwide. The structural modifications required to handle carrier deck impacts made the aircraft even more robust and reliable. As the C-130 program matured, newer variants incorporated advanced medical capabilities from the beginning. The C-130H, introduced in the 1970s, featured improved environmental control systems that could maintain precise temperature and humidity levels throughout the cargo hold. This capability was crucial for transporting patients with severe burns or other injuries requiring carefully controlled conditions. The C-130J Super Hercules, the latest variant of the aircraft, represents the culmination of decades of refinement in aeromedical evacuation capabilities. Advanced avionics allow precise navigation to remote locations, while improved engines provide better performance at high altitudes and in hot weather conditions. The aircraft can be rapidly reconfigured from cargo transport to medical evacuation, with medical equipment pallets that can be installed in under an hour. Modern C-130 medical configurations can accommodate everything from basic first aid to complex surgical procedures. The Critical Care Air Transport Team system allows specialized medical personnel to accompany the most critically injured patients, providing intensive care throughout the evacuation flight. This capability has saved countless lives by ensuring continuous medical care from the point of injury to definitive treatment facilities.
The aircraft's contribution to disaster relief operations has been equally impressive. Following natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, and tsunamis, C-130 medical evacuation aircraft are often among the first responders to reach affected areas. Their ability to operate from damaged airports and improvised landing strips make them invaluable for reaching disaster victims when other aircraft cannot. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami demonstrated the C-130's humanitarian capabilities on a massive scale. Medical evacuation variants flew hundreds of missions to remote islands, evacuating thousands of injured survivors to hospitals throughout the region. The aircraft's ability to land on short beaches and coral airstrips made rescue possible in locations that would have been unreachable by other means. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 provided another demonstration of the aircraft's disaster response capabilities. C-130 medical evacuation aircraft flew non-stop missions from New Orleans, evacuating critically injured patients from hospitals that had lost power and were running out of supplies. The aircraft's ability to operate from damaged airports with limited ground support proved crucial during the chaotic aftermath of the hurricane. The global reach of C-130 medical evacuation operations has expanded continuously since the 1960s. The aircraft has participated in medical evacuations on every continent and in every type of environment imaginable. From the frozen runways of Antarctica to the desert airstrips of Africa, from Pacific Island atolls to mountain airfields in the Himalayas, the C-130 has proven that no location is too remote for medical evacuation. The aircraft's role in supporting international peacekeeping operations has been particularly significant. United Nations and NATO medical evacuation missions routinely rely on C-130 aircraft to transport wounded peacekeepers from conflict zones to medical facilities in safer areas.
The aircraft's neutral appearance and humanitarian mission profile make it more acceptable to warring factions than military fighters or bombers. The engineering innovations that made the C-130's medical capabilities possible continue to influence aircraft design today. The modular interior design pioneered in the Hercules has been adopted by virtually every modern military transport aircraft. The ability to rapidly reconfigure an aircraft from cargo transport to medical evacuation is now considered essential for military operations. Advanced life support systems developed for C-130 medical missions have found applications in civilian emergency medical services as well. Many of the portable medical devices first used in C-130 evacuations are now standard equipment in ground ambulances and helicopter medical services. The experience gained in providing medical care at altitude and in challenging flight conditions has improved emergency medical care throughout the aviation industry. The training requirements for C-130 medical crews have evolved into comprehensive programs that serve as models for other services. Flight nurses and medical technicians must complete extensive training in aviation physiology, emergency medical procedures, and aircraft systems. This training ensures that medical personnel can provide the highest level of care under the unique conditions of military flight operations. The psychological aspects of aeromedical evacuation have also received increased attention as the C-130 program matured. Medical crews are trained to provide not just physical care, but emotional support to wounded personnel who may be experiencing their first airplane flight under traumatic circumstances. The ability to maintain patient morale during long evacuation flights can be as important as the medical treatment itself.
As we look back on more than 6 decades of C-130 medical evacuation operations, the achievements seem almost impossible to believe. From Willis Hawkins' initial design in 1951 to Lieutenant Flatley's historic carrier landings in 1963. From the jungles of Vietnam to the mountains of Afghanistan, the aircraft has consistently exceeded expectations and broken new ground in military medicine. The flying hospital that could land on aircraft carriers has become one of the most successful aircraft programs in aviation history. More than 2,500 C-130 aircraft have been built, serving with air forces in over 70 countries worldwide. The aircraft remains in production today, more than 70 years after its first flight, making it the longest continuously produced military aircraft in history. The human cost of war makes the C-130's medical mission particularly poignant. Every successful evacuation represents a life saved, a family that won't receive a telegram from the War Department, a soldier who will return home to their loved ones. The statistics are impressive. Hundreds of thousands of wounded personnel evacuated, survival rates improved dramatically, response times reduced from hours to minutes. But beyond the numbers lies a deeper truth about American engineering and innovation. When faced with an impossible challenge, a small team of engineers in California chose to think differently. They ignored conventional wisdom about what an aircraft should look like and focused instead on what it needed to accomplish. The result was an ugly duckling that became one of the most important aircraft in military history. The C-130's success also demonstrates the importance of adaptability in military systems. An aircraft designed to carry cargo became a flying hospital, a gunship, a spy plane, a weather reconnaissance platform, and dozens of other specialized variants. This flexibility has allowed the basic design to remain relevant through multiple generations of technological advancement. The carrier landing trials of 1963 represented a perfect example of American willingness to attempt the impossible. Military leaders looked at a massive cargo plane and asked not whether it could land on a carrier, but how to make it happen. The engineering challenges were immense, the risks were significant, but the potential benefits justified the effort. Lieutenant James Flatley's courage in piloting those first carrier landings cannot be overstated. He was literally flying into uncharted territory, attempting something that had never been done and might never be attempted again. His skill and professionalism made aviation history, and opened new possibilities for military medical evacuation. The sign painted on the side of the KC-130F during the carrier trials read, "Look Ma, no hook," a humorous reference to the aircraft's ability to land without the arresting cables used by carrier-based fighters. But the message was also serious. American ingenuity had found a way to make the impossible possible. Today, C-130 medical evacuation aircraft continue to serve around the world, carrying on a tradition that began with Willis Hawkins' determination to build something different. The aircraft may not be as glamorous as supersonic fighters or stealth bombers, but its contribution to military medicine and humanitarian operations is immeasurable. The story of how American engineers turned a cargo plane into a flying hospital that could land on aircraft carriers is ultimately a story about problem-solving, innovation, and the refusal to accept limitations. It's about engineers who dared to think differently, test pilots who risked their lives to prove new concepts, and medical personnel who dedicated their careers to saving lives in the most challenging conditions imaginable. As Lieutenant Flatley lifted off from the USS Forrestal after that final carrier landing in November 1963, he couldn't have known that his historic flight would inspire decades of innovation in military medicine. The record he set that day for the largest and heaviest aircraft to ever land on a carrier still stands today. But more importantly, his demonstration of what was possible opened minds to new ways of thinking about military medical evacuation. The C-130 Hercules continues to fly today, more than 70 years after its first flight, and 60 years after those historic carrier landings. It remains the backbone of military airlift operations worldwide, and continues to save lives in medical evacuation missions around the globe. The ugly duckling that Kelly Johnson thought would destroy Lockheed has instead become one of the most successful aircraft programs in aviation history. The legacy of the flying hospital lives on in every medical evacuation mission, every disaster relief operation, every time a C-130 lands on a remote airstrip to carry wounded personnel to safety. It's a legacy written not in test flight reports or engineering specifications, but in the lives saved and the hope provided to those who serve in harm's way around the world. The American engineers who created this remarkable aircraft proved that with determination, innovation, and a willingness to challenge conventional thinking, even the most impossible dreams can take flight.